Hello everyone. Today I don't come to you in happiness, in anguish, or in sadness. No, dear listeners, today I come in rage. In rage and confusion. Now I would imagine the first question you would ask is why? Why do you come to us in rage and confusion? Well, the previous week has been an emotional roller coaster since Codemasters, the game development company in charge of the official F1 game, decided to show us a FIFA-style player ranking system where each of the drivers are given a score based on certain attributes. Now let's just say that at best Codemasters' attempt was strange, and at worst downright crazy. So in my rage today, I have decided to not only point out all of the blatant wrongdoing, but to also come up with my own improved ranking system of the F1 drivers. Right, now before I start my proper complaining, I guess let me create some more context. Each driver is given a rating for 4 attributes. These are pace, racecraft, experience, and awareness. Now, pace I would assume is, absolute and raw speed that a driver possesses. Racecraft is a lot of things encapsulated, overtaking, tire management, race pace in general. Experience would be just the amount of races that you've participated in and I guess the banks of memories and reserves that you've built up over the years in terms of assisting you now in making decisions on the track. And lastly, you get awareness. And this one to me, I think is a bit foggy, but again, I'm going to infer that Codemasters meant this to be awareness of yourself relative to others, awareness of what's going on, on the track, what's going on around you, what's going on with strategy, just all around awareness of what's happening during race day and I guess during qualifying. Now, these skills are supposed to make tasks in the game more easy and also more difficult depending on which driver you have employed in your virtual team. But for the purposes of this podcast, that is irrelevant. What grated my gears were the inaccuracies in the actual rating of drivers. So without any further messing about, let me get into my list of complaints. And we will start with Valtteri Bottas. Now, we all know Valtteri as being a very nice, friendly Finnish driver with a love for porridge and facial hair, but Codemasters has decided that Bottas is in fact the second best driver on the grid behind Hamilton, which is what I would call slightly ambitious. Now, of course, this is all driven by Codemasters arriving at the conclusion that Valtteri is in fact the Eye of Sauron, with an awareness score of 99 out of a possible 100. Now, for perspective, Hamilton is scored second best in that category with a score of about 95, and I would like Codemasters to explain for 10 marks what aspect of Bottas' awareness means he is at minimum 4% higher than everyone else. Can he see into the beyond? Can he speak to the dead? Does he have a sixth sense? Does he, have an enhanced sense of smell? To smell track conditions where other drivers can merely use the gift of sight? I would like Codemasters to at least provide some justification around why they feel Valtteri is so much more aware of his surroundings compared to the other drivers. Because firstly, I think all Formula 1 drivers are pretty aware of what's going on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been a Formula 1 driver. And secondly, why pick Valtteri Bottas as being, the poster child in Codemasters' world of what a completely aware driver would have to be? Now, again, I know Bottas is a very handy race driver, and Hamilton does make him look a bit average from time to time, but we can all agree that Valtteri is not the second best driver on the grid. That, accolade would probably go to Max Verstappen at this point. There could maybe be an argument made for Leclerc, or if you like to live in the past, Sebastian Vettel, but Valtteri Bottas has never been, the second in command or the biggest threat to Hamilton's title fight, in my mind at least. Happy for you guys to disagree on that. But I think Codemasters overreached a bit when they decided that Valtteri is going to be our silver medalist when it came to the rankings of the drivers. Now, my next complaint is about Kimi Räikkönen and his position relative to the guy that replaced him, Charles Leclerc. Now, again, small fish, I guess, but Räikkönen has a total score. Now, this is across all of the attributes, coming to a final all-round score of 87% out of 100, which is the same as Daniel Ricciardo's score and one more than that of Leclerc. Now, Kimi Räikkönen in his prime was a well-oiled machine of Finnish ice and brilliance with relentless speed and ruthless efficiency, but the last couple of years, they haven't been kind. We all saw what happened, firstly when he went up against Alonso, and then after that when he went up against Vettel. He was never really in a position to challenge for the title, even when Ferrari had quite a good car in 2017 and 2018. And I mean, it just hasn't gone that well for Kimi. His last couple of years at Ferrari. Now, of course, he's still a model of consistency, but we have to be practical and say that a year ago, or more than a year ago now, Ferrari made the right choice to promote Leclerc and send Kimi to Alfa Romeo, which is why I'm surprised that the overall score for Leclerc came out lower than what Raikkonen's was. And I suspect it's probably because of the experience rating that contributes to the overall rating, where Kimi, he's made 315 Grand Prix starts, and Leclerc is now about to start his third season in F1. But we need to be pragmatic about this and think, who out of the two of them are more likely to win, firstly, races for Ferrari, and secondly, championships for Ferrari? And I think the answer is quite resounding in that it's going to be Charles Leclerc that's going to be doing that for Ferrari. Not necessarily because he's young, just because at this point he's performing better than what Kimi Räikkönen did the last 2-3 years that he was at Ferrari. So I would, in my head, imagine that would warrant a higher rating for Leclerc, despite his inexperience relative to Räikkönen. Because at the end of the day, I think maybe the first year or first 2 years in the sport, you can use inexperience as an excuse. But then after that, I don't think there's a big difference in, your experience relative to more experienced drivers. But again, that is just me. So if you guys disagree with me, let me know and I can discuss this further with you on social media like a civilized person would. Alrighty, so the next black mark on my list is the McLaren drivers. Now, Sainz has an overall rating of 82 out of 100, and Norris has an overall rating of 79. Now, I guess this in itself isn't outside of the realm of possibility, but when you look at how the scores are built up, if you look at the components of the scores, you start asking some questions. Now, firstly, Sainz beat Norris in the pace category with 84 points compared to Norris's 80. Now, obviously, pace, as I explained at the beginning of the episode, would probably relate to, outright qualifying performance, balls to the wall, one lap, pull a cat out of the bag type qualifying, take your breath away speed. And I guess not one of the two would probably fall into that category per se at the moment, but it's worth saying that Norris out-qualified Sainz on average last year, and he probably showed more inherent pace compared to his Spanish teammates. Now, granted, Norris has only driven in the sport for 1 year, but I think his performance against a seasoned veteran and a very, very strong driver like Sainz would have warranted a higher score relative to Carlos, and maybe even a higher score relative to Carlos in the pace category specifically. So that doesn't really make sense to me, firstly. And then secondly, Lando Norris then switches things around and beats Carlos Sainz in racecraft. Now, we need to think back to Sainz getting a Brazil podium from the back of the grid, his great fight back through the field in Austria. I mean, he scored the most points out of everybody He scored more points even than Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly over the year last year, despite each of them having half a year in the Red Bull car. And then we say Lando Norris is better than Sainz when it comes to racecraft, i.e., your general performance and consistency and all-around excellence on a Sunday. I don't really buy that from Codemasters, so I want to call their bluff and say I don't know how they came up with this score, but I feel the logic doesn't check out when you look at the actual facts, and I'll get into that a bit more later on. So I guess we need to look at Sainz and look at Norris and come to the conclusion that based on the information we have, Sainz should have a higher rating than Norris. But as Camila Cabello sings in a mid-tempo hit,
I have questions for you.
Now next up, I would like to report the Codemasters to the FIA for blatant George Russell erasure and disregard of his overall excellence, because they had the gall, they had the audacity to give George Russell an overall score of 75 out of 100. This is behind the likes of Grosjean, Magnussen, Stroll, all of whom scored higher than Russell at an overall level. And I mean, if I just look at the statistics here, they gave Lance Stroll, probably the worst qualifier in the history of the world, a higher score for pace than what they gave Russell. They gave Stroll 83 for pace and Russell a measly 80. And that in itself, if that is in any way excusable, I don't think it is. Another comparison here, they give Russell 78 for awareness, which is less than what they give to Nicholas Latifi, the driver that has never even driven a Formula One car. So I would like Codemasters to explain, in no uncertain terms, what they were thinking when they were giving George Russell scores, because putting him at a disadvantage just because he was driving for Williams, a team that Russell probably carried on his broad shoulders, him alone, last year. Why would they give him a score like that? I just don't understand, and I would like Codemasters to write a formal letter of apology to me, the TF1 show, to really show their contrition and their commitment to doing better in the future, as to no longer disadvantage George Russell in the way that they've been doing up to now. Right, so there were many more complaints that I could have raised, but instead of being negative, I decided to rather be constructive and to try and improve upon this crime against the F1 community. I've used actual mathematics and came up with my own ranking scores based on Codemasters criteria, and I can give you a quick summary. My top 5 looks like follows. So I have Lewis Hamilton in first with an overall score of 93%. Next, I have Max Verstappen on 90. After him, Sebastian Vettel on 86. Valtteri Bottas with a much more humble 84%. And then Daniel Ricciardo on 83. Now, I can say that the full list of all of the drivers, all 20 of them, will be shared on my social media pages. So I dare you to go and have a look and let me know if you agree with my findings and conclusions. And that's it, I guess, for another episode of the TF1 show, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for listening, and please subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. You can also give me a follow on Twitter, where my handle is @TF1 show, where we will be counting down the last remaining weeks before F1 returns in full force. Until next time, bye.